Let's bring in Sean Hannity. Sean, good to have you with us. You know, it is remarkable, Sean, on this Super Tuesday, when you look back over the last several years and all of the times that many people looked at this situation and did not see the incredible resilience of Donald Trump, of this political figure, and his extraordinary commitment to doing this over again, despite the fact that every arrow in the quiver had been thrown and fired at him over and over and over, Sean.
You know, the term I use, and I know I repeat myself, but I think it bears repeating, is we're really watching history. Let me start there. But Donald Trump defies all conventional political gravity. None of the rules that we thought would apply to any presidential candidate apply to him. And we see that he gets indicted, his poll numbers go up. He gets arraigned, his poll numbers go up. He gets a mugshot, his poll numbers go up. The more they attack him, the more he seems to galvanize support around the country. What's fascinating, and I know you've gone over a lot of polls tonight, one that really stood out to me was 10% of Biden voters are now voting for Donald Trump. Look, you have the New York Times Siena poll, you have the Fox News poll, you have the Wall Street Journal poll, CBS, he beat the 50% threshold. And then you look at Gallup, he's at 38%, an approval rating that is near record low for an incumbent president. Very difficult to overcome. You look at the ABC poll, you've got 86% of Americans thinking that he's not strong enough cognitively to be president. He's too old. That shows up in pretty much every poll. Then you've got to look historically. What do we always look at in election years? What drives elections? What drives people to the polls? Usually it is peace and prosperity. Okay, well, how are things looking around the world? We've got war in Europe. We've got war in the Middle East. We have a president seemingly in conflict with our number one ally in the Middle East, that, of course, being Israel. On the other hand, he's done everything he can do to turn a blind eye to the Iranians selling oil, some $90 to $100 billion worth, and, of course, offering $6 billion in a trade for hostages, allowing a payment from Iraq for $10 billion. That's insanity to me. So then you go to the economic front. We now are living in an America where 60% of our fellow Americans, and I've been there early in my adult life, it's not a fun place to be, are living paycheck to paycheck. And many people are putting bare necessities on high-interest credit cards. It is a very tough time. For all the talk for the many months about Bidenomics, and we suspect, and we keep hearing leaks, that the president will talk a lot about corporate greed and shrinkflation in his State of the Union address. They have tried that message, and he is way upside down on the economy. People do not feel that they were better off than they were 4 years ago. There's so much anecdotal evidence that really points to an opportunity for President Trump to really make history in 244 days. That will come very fast. That will happen very fast. It's going to be fascinating. Let me throw a few polls at you, if you don't mind. I'll put my glasses on. Look, if you look at climate change, you have most Americans, by an overwhelming majority, think Joe's policies have mostly failed. Americans don't want EVs thrown at them. They would like their gas-powered vehicles. They don't want their stoves taken away, their refrigerators taken away, and they don't want their air conditioners taken away. Okay, so he's not even doing well on that. If you look demographically, what do we see? We see African Americans, Hispanic Americans, young people, suburban women in larger and larger numbers. All of these demographics comprise a very large part of the Democratic coalition or the Democratic base. Donald Trump, as of right now today, 244 days out, is doing very well with those constituencies. Look at Donald Trump with African Americans. Look at the poll. All demographics, he's at 28% with African Americans. That's massive. If you look further, working class Americans, 58% of them believe Joe Biden's policies have failed. Has he improved our image on the world stage? 61% of Americans give him a fail grade. On the economy, 61% give Joe Biden a big F. Do you feel more safe and secure? 63% think Joe Biden's, policies have failed. unifying the country. 69% think he's failed. And on the number one issue that we have all covered from Iowa onward seems to be immigration. And you have a whopping 71% of Americans that did not buy the 3 years of lying that the border is secure and the border's closed. Now, as of tonight, this is now a new race. This is now President Trump. He will win the Republican nomination. He will have an opportunity to become the 47th president of the United States. And I believe these are the policies, these are the issues that will define what happens 244 days from now.
You know, Sean, a couple of things. Karl Rove was talking about how the party needs to come together and unify, and he brought out his whiteboard and pointed to all these states and all the people voting for Nikki Haley, some of whom said they had a problem with Donald Trump and weren't going to vote for them. I pushed back and said in a general election, which is going to happen very soon, whether he clinches March 12th or March 19th, he's going to be the Republican nominee. It then is a binary choice. And so to your point, you know, how people felt in the Trump administration about the economy, about the border, about world affairs. Do you think that those people voting for Nikki Haley, Republicans, will come home in a general election when it is a binary choice?
I think most of them will, not all of them. But let's go back to one number that really popped to me, and that was 10% of 2020 Joe Biden voters. They are saying publicly to pollsters they're going to vote for Donald Trump in 2024. That's how dissatisfied they are. Now, that presents a challenge to the president. I would say be magnanimous in victory tonight. Look, running for president is really hard. Every single person over all the years that I've done this, and by the way, I love nights like tonight. Don't you guys love these nights?
We do.
I will be up at 3 o'clock in the morning and still watching our coverage. And if it's a replay, I'll be watching that too. It's just a fascinating process to me. And so I think, yeah, on the other side of that coin, you can look, I would say, okay, some of the demographics that are part of the Democratic coalition, I think some of them will go home. But if Donald Trump could even hold 20% of that number that he's showing now in an increase, that would be enough to be a significant win come November 5th. On the other side, I do think that the president has an opportunity to unite the party. And I think the message has to be there are more things that unite us than divide us. We agree on border. We agree on law and order. We agree on energy independence. We agree on peace through strength. We agree that Joe Biden's policies have failed. We believe that the American people deserve better. And maybe the president at some point will reach out to all of his primary opponents and invite them to join him and help him even to the extent that they're willing to, for the sake of the American people, unite around an agenda that will help our economy, help America on the world stage, bring us more prosperity, bring peace around the world, and also put America safe. And please secure our borders. Please get our budget under control. We cannot spend like this, and we cannot have tens of thousands of people from China, Russia, Iran, Syria, Egypt, and Afghanistan coming into this country without being vetted. That is the biggest national security threat I think we've ever faced.
Sean, just real quickly, you know, if, as it clearly looks right now, Donald Trump becomes the nominee for the GOP, how much does that galvanize, you know, just watching some of the other coverage earlier tonight? People very, very deeply unhappy, upset that this is where we are 4 years later. And how much does that energize and galvanize the opposition that has come after this former president so vociferously and so nonstop for all these years, Sean?
I honestly, at this point, I don't think there's anything left to throw at the guy.
Right.
They have thrown everything in the kitchen sink at him. And he's still standing, and he's not only standing, he's standing strong. Look, I have a lot of good things to say about a lot of his primary opponents. I really do. And I respect all of them. Anybody that steps into that arena, it is a blood sport. I think you both know that I'm into mixed martial arts. You step into the octagon, Us, I give you full respect. It is just very hard. And none of them suspect that they're going to lose. However, there comes a point, why did you get into the race? If you got into the race because you believe in the dream that is America, you believe it's our duty and obligation to hand off this country better than we inherited it, then I think that is a galvanizing force that could transcend all politics. And I would urge everybody that ran, and President Trump, they don't have to be best friends, but they can agree on the fundamentals that certainly would reverse the downward trend that Joe Biden has taken the country in. And by the way, I don't even think that he knows today is Tuesday. And that's a problem for this country. And I don't say that flippantly. He has not had, if you observe like we do, what I would call a clean event in months, meaning that he's not mumbling, bumbling, stumbling, not knowing whether to exit stage left or stage right. You've got teams of people, letting him go up the baby stairs of Air Force One because he's not strong enough physically to get up the big boy stairs. We've got a real problem. China's watching, Russia's watching, Iran is watching, North Korea is watching. This world is a dangerous place, and I think things will get really out of control if we don't change course in November.
Sean, last thing, ahead of the midterms, we looked at polls and we thought this is going to be potentially a blowout for Republicans as you looked at the issue of immigration, as you looked at crime, as you looked at the economy. But then the Democrats went with a threat to democracy and obviously played on the issue of abortion very heavily in races across the country. I talked to Britt Hume earlier. He said he can't remember polls that were this upside down on a lot of issues for the current president. But should we have that caveat? Because clearly they're going with threat to democracy and going with abortion heavily as we look at these polls today, and then you fast forward to the general election.
Yeah, both of you asking great questions tonight. I got to give you credit. I will say this. We already know what the Democratic Playbook is going to be. It's going to be democracy, and it's kind of ironic, the people that are doing that are the very people that would unilaterally allow one politician to take a candidate off the ballot for the reason of insurrection, something Donald Trump has never been tried, even tried with, or even there's never been a case brought against him on it, never mind convicted of it. So you want to talk about a threat to democracy, I would argue that is a threat to democracy. But, to your broader point, Brett, I will tell you, they're going to run on democracy. They're going to run on January 6th. They're going to run on the issue of abortion. I would argue, and I think I'm right, that in 22, Republicans were not prepared for how the Democrats would demagogue the issue of abortion. And I understand people have very strong convictions. However, if you want to look at it strictly from a political point of view, and I believe in the sanctity of life, but I understand that the country is not where I am. Politically, the country is at probably where Dobbs was at 15 weeks. Republicans need to understand that. If they pick somebody like they did in 22, like Doug Mastriano, who made no exceptions for rape, incest, of the mother's life, I think that is a mistake. They've got to have an answer for the millions and millions of dollars that will be spent on ads about abortion. I was glad to see President Trump come out quickly on the issue of IVF and with a very strong statement supporting it. And the next thing is Republicans, then it's going to be the other playbook, which is Republicans are racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic. They want dirty air and water, transphobic, and they want to kill grandma and grandpa. So that will be their playbook. That's all they've got, because they can't run on one thing, Brett and Martha. They can't run on, are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Well, Sean, as always, we appreciate it. Thanks for
great job
the coverage
tonight, guys.
Good to see you, Sean. Thank you very much.
By the way, I got to say this about Hemmer. Is he not great at that big board?
We're
He used to be the Hannity big board.
Right now.
He is.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.